Hello, superstar. Welcome to 11 Shifts to Improve Your Entire Life. In this video, I'm going to share 11 shifts that you can implement from one way of thinking to a different way of thinking that will impact everything in your life. Essentially, when you implement these 11 shifts in your perspective and way of looking at life, it will profoundly shift the paradigm in which you show up in the world. The first shift is to shift away from focusing on expectations and to instead focus on alignment. What I mean by that is sometimes we can get caught up in what we want to create, the outcome, the result. I want to get into Harvard, for example. That's what happened to me in high school. And I got very attached to that outcome. Now, instead, we can focus on alignment. Like, what would be the absolute best fit for me based on my purpose, my beliefs, my values? If I had asked those questions back in high school, I would have realized for myself that Harvard was not the best fit. But I was so attached to that outcome that I didn't even ask the questions to see what would be a better fit for me. So in life, as this looks every day, day in, day out, what that looks like is really tapping into knowing yourself, knowing what you want to create, and making decisions from alignment to what you're trying to create in your life. A values alignment, purpose alignment, mission alignment, desire alignment, rather than getting fixated on a specific way that it needs to look. This can also help us from going down rabbit holes with something that seems like it would be a good idea, but isn't really a right fit for us. The second shift is to move away from trying to balance your life and your time and everything and move towards integration. Why? When we think of something in terms of balancing it, we're automatically assuming that there's a fixed quantity of it. We're automatically kind of operating from scarcity. Trying to balance my time is sort of from a paradigm of there's only so many hours in the day, and so I have to divide that day up in this way so that I can balance things. And what instead I'm inviting you to consider is a way of integration, such that these things start to flow together, and you can find integration instead of saying, well, I have to balance health and motherhood and play. What would it look like to do things that integrate healthiness, motherhood, and play all into one, right? So finding ways to integrate life rather than have these compartmentalized, balanced pieces. There's a quote that I'm going to read you. I have it here on my computer because it's so good. It made such an impression on me when I first heard it, maybe 12 or 13 years ago. The master in the art of living makes little distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his information and his recreation, his love and his religion. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence in whatever he does, leaving others to decide whether he is working or playing. To him, he is always doing both. Now, personally, I would swap out him and his for her and hers, but you get the idea. That's the energetic of integration versus balancing. The third is moving away from pressure to pleasure. Now, a lot of times, if you're at all like me and a lot of my clients who are overachievers, we get ourselves to do things by applying pressure. We set deadlines, we force ourselves to do things and take action. That is a very powerful way of creating outcomes, and it is a way that a lot of us get to a certain level of success in our lives. And it's also a way that sometimes we can push away desire and pleasure and the things that we really enjoy. It can look like just constantly trying to outsmart ourselves or outsmart each other. And ultimately, it can be a really exhausting way of operating in the world. And so the shift that I'm inviting you to is to decide if whatever activity is going to bring pleasure. Now, and I don't just mean pleasure as an outcome, like if I do this, then I'll be happy later, but rather in the doing of it, is there pleasure? And if not, how can you create it as a more pleasure-filled activity? So for example, this work that I'm doing right here, right now, in front of these cameras, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And when I started doing this work, I really struggled because I didn't really enjoy what I was doing. I didn't really appreciate talking to a camera. I personally like to talk to a human. And I was able, over the last couple of years that I've been doing this work, to reframe this and to create more pleasure out of it by changing up the way I do it, by asking the question, how can I make this be less about pressure and more about pleasure? So, for example, I get to play with finding really cool outfits and jewelry to bring to this experience so that I can have fun with what I get to wear. I'm picking topics that are more aligned with my heart and my soul rather than only choosing topics that I know are going to get searches and views. So I've been able to take the question, how can I bring more pleasure to this so that I can lessen the feeling of pressure? And by the way, before I get into the rest of these shifts, I want to invite you to take a moment, subscribe to this channel, like this video, and maybe post a comment below. The next shift is from attachment to equanimity. Attachment is when we become fixated on certain outcomes. Equanimity, in contrast, is when we start to trust and embrace a certain amount of paradox. Meaning, how can I be totally all in committed to this outcome that I really want and desire and be detached and neutral about it at the same time? It's not an easy thing to do, but it's a really powerful thing to do. And I invite you to consider when you're doing sales, when you're creating a new program, when you're in a new relationship with somebody, how can you cultivate the feeling of equanimity? I'm all in and I'm unattached. I love strategy. Strategy is my thing. I'm really good at it. And I've found myself constantly coming back to strategy when trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And instead, so the problem with getting into strategies, I would get into the how to do something rather than really tapping into what is it that I really want. So strategy for me, kind of conceptually, I think of it as like a head down kind of activity. And what I'm inviting you to consider is shifting towards more of a visioning, right? How do I create the vision of what I want? And then from vision, strategy follows, but always going into, will this work? What's the audience for this? How much should I charge? When should I launch it? All those strategic questions by themselves often end up putting a lot of pressure on us. We already talked about pressure. So shifting the focus to what's the vision? What is it that I want to experience? What do I want to create in the world? Who is this for? And really coming from more of the bigger questions instead of the head down, kind of figuring everything out. Another shift is away from trying to find certainty in everything and trying to have clear, concrete answers, right? There's a desire to have certainty, clarity, focus. That can feel very attractive to know what we're doing. And sometimes when we know what we're doing and we're really clear and focused, we can miss out on bigger, more beautiful things that we could be doing or that we could be experiencing in life. So a thing to cultivate instead of only focusing on certainty would be to cultivate trust. And what I mean by trust is the kind of trust where we're like, well, this or something better. This or something that's more aligned, more beautiful, more enjoyable, right? Leaving ourselves some room to be open to whatever wants to divinely unfold for us. So instead of focusing only on having certainty all the time, what does it look like to actively cultivate, I trust the universe for something to show up. This is what I'm curious about. This is what I want to create. And I'm open to other ways of achieving that. Another shift is away from competition and towards cooperation. So much of the business world is built around this idea that it's a dog eat dog, there's only a certain amount of pie kind of world, and that we got to fight to get our piece of the action, right? And I invite you to consider instead that when we collaborate and we cooperate, we can create a bigger pie. We can create more opportunities. And so what does it look like to amplify through collaboration and cooperation with others? Another shift is noticing when we're operating from ego versus operating from our highest self. The ego is often fixated on fear, scarcity, pain, and problems. And our highest self often sees a more expansive vision and possibility. So one of the ways Jake Merriman, one of my mentors a while back, taught me to discern between where is this decision coming from. And so you've heard me talk probably a lot about physiology and feeling answers in the body. But I remember Jake helping me to notice and pay attention to, am I making this decision from ego, from fear, from scarcity, from instinct, or am I making it from intuition, higher self, expansiveness? And so just tapping into the body, you can start to get a sense of where this decision is coming from and really cultivate decisions that align with your highest self. That's going to pull you forward toward a more expansive better version of you and better decisions for the long term. The 10th is to move away from time management and move towards energy management. So again, this is about coming into more connection with your body and your physiology. And instead of trying to cut up your day into smaller pieces and organize them, really looking at what brings me energy, what creates more energy so that I can do more. It's also getting away from a very rational and logical way of looking at time and opening up to more trans-rational and even spiritual ways of looking at time. Like when you have a lot of energy, you've experienced this, when you have a lot of energy, you get more done. Time multiplies. When you have less energy, when you're energy poor or even energy neutral, things take longer. You resist, you procrastinate, you sabotage yourself. Things take more time. So how can you cultivate energy rather than focusing just on managing your time? How do you increase your energy? How do you nurture your body? How do you do things that bring you more joy and that bring more energy to this situation so that you boom, 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 get more done? And then finally, probably the most powerful shift to cultivate to create a whole new way of living life is to move away from a scarcity mentality and towards an abundance mentality. Now, I'm not going to dive deep into it here because this video is well over its time, but I will invite you to go from here into my other video, how to cultivate an abundance mindset. Enjoy.